Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Cash and Guns 2nd edition from Repos and Asmodee. This is the 2nd edition of a game that has been out for quite some time. I think the original Cash and Guns was out in like the early to mid 2000s and become quite a cult classic party game at that point. Now, I never played the original edition. I cannot compare the two for that reason, although I've heard that the new edition streamlines a couple of things, but mostly just has makes things a little bit neater, has a big artwork makeover, and now they're using the artist John Kavalik. I never knew how to pronounce his name correctly, but he's the same artist who does all the art for Munchkin and all the related Steve Jackson games. Whereas I had seen the artwork for the original edition, and it still looked okay, but this one just seemed like they wanted to go for a little more family-friendly, cartoony type look to it instead of a comic book look. Now, if you're not familiar with Cash and Guns, this is a party game where up to 8 players, I say 6 in my overview, I mean to say 8, are trying to divvy up loot after a big heist. You're all standing around like a table or in this big warehouse like Reservoir Dogs, and there's a bunch of loot like stacks of money and pieces of famous artwork and diamonds, and you're trying to figure out who gets what. But of course, you're all thieves. There are no honor amongst thieves, not really, and you're trying to have more than the other players at the end of the game, and sometimes that's going to require shooting each other, and that's what the whole game is. The game comes with foam guns that you actually point at each other during the course of the game, which makes for a lot of funny pictures. Now, let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a brief look at Cash and Guns. This is a competitive game for up to 6 players. The goal of the game is to have the most money at the end of the game. You are going to play the game over 8 rounds of play. You're going to keep track of that by actually taking all the loot cards and dividing them up into 8 stacks and keeping them separate. You'll lay out 1 stack in a row just like that together with the boss's desk, just like so. Everyone's going to choose a character. You have characters like Nikita and Deacon and James and Yoko. You'll take a character, you will take one of the guns, and you'll just hold on to that for right now. You are also going to take a set of bullet cards. There's going to be 5 of these cards that are called click cards, just have a little white flag on them, and you're going to have 3 of the bang cards, which are actually deadly. You will also get randomly dealt a power card, which you will put face up in front of you. This is a special power you're going to have for the duration of the game. It will apply whenever it tells you that it applies. So just to show you a few of them, you have the, let's focus in a bit. You have the Doctor, who says that when this player lays down, this player will remove 1 wound. This will all make sense when I get done with the explanation. The Cunning, this player is allowed to change his bullet card at the end of the hold-up during Step 3. The Stealthy, when this player lays down, they immediately take a $10,000 bill from the middle of the table, if it is available. And the Dictator, once per loot share, if you are present, you can forbid another player from taking a specific type of loot as they're about to take it. And that's just a few of the cards. There are a lot of them in the game. Now, here's how it's going to go. First off, one player is going to randomly be selected as the Godfather or Godmother, as the case may be. That player will randomly be the Godfather. They'll take the desk, put it in front of them. Also, on the other side of here is a cheat sheet for the turn order, so the Godfather can keep track of that. They're kind of in charge of everything. They do the countdowns and all of that stuff. The first step of every round is uncovering all of the different loot cards, which you should already have done at the beginning of the game. Then every player is going to take one of their bullet cards and secretly place it face down in front of them, locking it in. If it's a click card, it means that your intention is to not shoot anyone this round. You may point your gun at someone, and you may actually shoot the gun at that person, but a click card means that you're not doing any kind of wounding. And these are the little wound markers. Each person can only take 3 wounds before they are dead. However, if you put a bang card down on the table in front of you, you are intending to kill someone, and you only have 3 of those, so you have to use them wisely. Now, once everyone has locked in their card, everyone takes their gun, takes them to hand, and then holds them up in the air or points them at the table, whatever the case might be. The Godfather is going to count to 3. On the count of 3, every player simultaneously points their gun at another player, holding it in place with whatever player they have selected. So if I hold my gun here, I am targeting James over there, or at least a player of James. The next up is the Godfather's privilege. So, while everyone is holding their guns at one another, the Godfather can choose to have one player change their target. So let's say I was holding my gun here at James. The Godfather says, I don't want you to do that. Go ahead and turn your gun towards Deacon. Or in a lot of situations, I might have my gun turned at the Godfather for the round. And they're going to say, well, yeah, you know what? I don't want that to happen. You go ahead and you aim at James. Anyways. And remember, the Godfather can only do this once per round. They can only change targets once. So, every player will still have their guns pointed at each other, and then the Godfather is going to count to 3 again. Now, this time, the players are deciding whether or not to stay in the round or not. The reason why this is important is because your whole goal here is to get as much of this loot as you possibly can, but if you are shot, if there are any guns pointing at you, if you have any kind of inkling that those guns might have a bullet inside of them, a bang card inside of them, you want to jump out of the round, because otherwise not only are you taking a wound, and you can only take 3 wounds before you die, but any wounded character is not going to get to take the loot anyways. So you can choose to dive out of the round, and if you dive out of the round, you won't get any loot, but at least you're not going to get shot. Now, on the count of 3, everyone decides, and they push their character down, and simultaneously, or not, decide to stay in. If you did decide to push your character down and fall out of the rounds, you take your bullet card without showing it to anyone and discard it. It has no effect, even if it was a bang card. The other players, however, resolve their cards. Now, if their cards were pointing at you and you decided to jump out of the round, then they just get discarded with no effects. But cards that are targeting players who are still in the round must be flipped over to determine whether or not they are bang cards or click cards. Like I said, anyone who is shot has to fall over anyways, and they are out of the round, and they take a wound token if that is the case. And if someone is dead, by the way, they are completely out of the game. They cannot win the game even if they've already collected some of the loot. Once that's all been resolved and you determine who is still in the round and eligible to take loot, you split the loot. Starting with the Godfather, if the Godfather is still alive in the round, each player is going to go around clockwise from the Godfather and take a piece of loot from the center of the table and keep it face down in front of them. Now, all the loot is different and does different things. Now, some of it is you have like $10,000 bills and the $5,000 bills. That's just straight up cash at the end of the game. You want to have the most of it, obviously. Some of it are pieces of artwork. Now, artwork gets better the more of it you have. So if you've only got one piece of artwork, it's only going to be worth $1,000. If you get 2 pieces, that's a total of $12,000, and so on and so forth, up to a maximum of $500,000 if you manage to have, and I've never seen this happen, 10 pieces of artwork. That's not for each piece of art, that's just a grand total of the value of your collection. There's also diamonds, which is what this big token has to do with. Each diamond is worth a different amount of money. It could be $1,000, $5,000. I think that's it. There might be $10,000. But the point is, at the end of the game, whoever has the most diamonds is going to be eligible to take the $60,000 diamond as a special bonus. Then there are special effects cards. Like the Bang card here lets you take a Bang card from the discard pile. So if someone had used one of their Bang cards, there must actually be one in the discard pile for this card to be usable. You'll get to take it and add it to your hand, which is important because, and you'll have to discard one of your other cards. That is important because remember, there's only a limited amount of Bang cards you have for the entire game. And then you have the health card here, which is going to let you get rid of all of your wounds. Now, if you don't like any of those loot cards, you can alternatively take the boss's desk, the Godfather's desk. If you take that, you will be the Godfather for the next round. And it is possible that you can be the Godfather more than one round in a row. And that's actually the game. That's the entire game. You are going to do this 8 times total, putting out new loot every single time. The Godfather desk will be presumably passing around. Each player is going to try to either shoot the other players or intimidate the other players into jumping out of the rounds in order to have as few people as possible divvy up the loot. Whoever has the most money at the end of the game is going to be the winner. That is Cash and Guns, second edition specifically. Let's get to my final thoughts. Cash and Guns gets by a lot on its gimmick and its charm, but in this particular case, the gimmick and the charm are actually part of what is a good game. I mean, a lot of games will have some sort of like wacky thing that you do that involves the components, but there's not a lot of substance behind it. But Cashing Guns is actually a fun game, and I think that it's a bit more complicated than most party games are, so I would definitely put it in the category of a Gamerly Gamers party game, sort of in the same way that Dixit is, although they are very different games. But still, there is some really interesting elements to the game. There's set collection and decision making and bluffing and trying to read your opponent that just makes the game that much more interesting than just pointing guns at people, although that is quite a lot of fun. So, starting from the beginning, artwork, theme, components. I do like the artwork quite a bit. I wasn't always a fan of John Kovalik and his artwork for Munchkin, but part of that is just because I didn't like Munchkin very much, so I was probably making a negative association there. But I think it works very well for this game, and it definitely makes the game a bit more family-friendly, and I think that's what they were going for there. As family-friendly as a game about pointing guns can be. So I think it works well. The actual guns themselves are really good quality, all the cards and everything like that, so I can't complain at all about the presentation or the actual physical bits. And the theme, again, is a lot of the fun of the game. It's just great picturing yourselves in like these famous movie situations like the Mexican standoff, and the game lends itself to role-playing. Whether you like it or not, or whether you actually want the other players to do that or not, people are going to be making voices and having fun with it, and that's fine. And I think that the game just kind of draws it out of you, and that's why it has such a good reputation as a party game while still having all these cool gameplay elements to it. Now, the actual gameplay itself and how you have to bluff with your cards and then go to divvying up the loot, there's a lot of interesting things going on there. At its core, it's like a set collection game. Try to get the most money, try to get these sets of artwork, decide when you want to take the Godfather, things like that in order to get turn order priority, which a lot of that are typical sort of almost Eurogame elements in some sense, just very, very light elements to it. But it works well here, and it's simple and it's streamlined. It's very easy to explain this game. It's very, very fast. But there are some strategic elements where you are trying to bluff out your opponent and say, well, okay, you've only got these 3 bang cards, and all the other players know this guy's been getting a ton of money. We got to take him out. But if we all aim our guns at him, then there's not a lot of discussion going on in the game, but if we all aim our guns, he's definitely going to drop out of the round. So you have to pick away at opponents, sometimes get a wound in, sometimes make people think that you're going to give a wound and maybe force them to drop out by bluffing. And because you never show a card that is not actually activated, like if someone drops out, you just discard the card without even looking at it. It lends that sort of mystery, well, did he put a bang card down or not? How many does he have left? And that's really interesting to me. I think that's one of the best parts about the game, as a matter of fact. It does give sort of a randomness to the game that I know when I first played the game, I wasn't that keen on. But I kind of came around to it. First off, when I realized that you can't be shot all the time. So even though you might get screwed, you might get hit one round, or you might drop out because 5 people have their guns pointed at you, you're going to have a good round eventually, and other people are going to waste their bangs, or they're going to themselves be forced to drop out, and the game sort of evens out. It's difficult to be too screwed in this game, although I have seen it happen. But there's always a chance for people to come back, and you can make that big score. And so I think that the whole mystery, sort of random, am I going to get shot or not element, it sort of evens out. I think it ends up being more fun than some of the rough edges of it would make you think. So that whole element, very fun. And that is, of course, the core of the game, is the pointing guns and putting the cards down. So that's great that works. Other parts of the game are interesting. I like the power cards. I'm not sure if those were always around. I think those might have been a new thing for this edition. But it's always good when you make yourself distinct from the other players. And having something that the other players can't do is a great thing and gives you just that little bit of edge over the other players. I like the fact that the Godfather does have more power than the other players. It's a viable option if the other shares aren't particularly good for you. Something that is fixed in the expansion that I'll talk about in my next video, but not in this game, is that when you get to the last round, it's sort of anticlimactic. No one's really going to take the Godfather, of course. But still, up until that point, it's always a viable option, and I do like that. It's worth something. And this is a solid game. I like the whole element of trying to go for the paintings. You're competing with the other players, not knowing whether they have more diamonds than you. Those are simple set collection elements, but they work very, very well here. There's a reason why that mechanism has endured for so long, and why it can slide easily into a light party game like Cash and Guns does. So I don't think this is the greatest party game ever. It's not the most cerebral party game ever, but I do think it's a spectacle to watch. It's quite a lot of lighthearted fun. I think that when people see you playing it, everyone stops and is like, what are you doing? And that's a great game. Well, that's a sign of a great game right there. And the fact that it has a good, decent game to back it up, that is definitely worth something. So again, I've never played the first edition. I can't tell you whether this is far superior than the original, but I do know that this edition is a lot of fun, and you can't go wrong with it. That is Cash and Guns from Repost and Asmodee. Very cool game. Hey, by coincidence, I'm pointing a gun at the camera.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.